Well, Outlander continues to go off the rails with what might be its strangest episode yet.
Don't change the channel, don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers. Over the sea to sky.
Hey guys, it's coming up for Outlander, Season 3, Episode 12, The Bakra, and I was looking forward to this episode, mainly because we only have 2 episodes left, and I was hoping that after last week, which was pretty much a calm before the storm, that this would be the episode that really gets the plot moving, and that a lot could really be going down. And I have to say that while I didn't necessarily hate this episode, this was weird. I mean, this was definitely, a really different episode for Outlander, and not different in the sense of last week where it was a lot more comedic and fun. No, this was weird in the sense where I genuinely don't know why they took the plot in this direction. Again, I didn't hate this episode. This was definitely a mixed bag for me, and I will give the episode props for starting to pick up the pace a little, because I feel like it's been a little bit, not a little bit, it's been very sluggish in the second half of the season, so I was happy to see them picking up the pace, but the choices they made in this episode are honestly very head-scratching. I don't really know where they were coming from with a lot of this episode, but let's just get into it, because I do want to talk about what went down. I just don't know why they need to take the plot in this direction. It was very strange overall. Right off the bat, we get what is easily one of the weirdest sequences we've ever had in the show. We start with young Ian, who, it's cool to see him again. You know, I knew we were going to see him, of course, and John Bell does a really good job here, because we get to see, like, kind of his point of view here, which, that in itself is very weird, because usually we're in Claire or Jamie's point of view. Here, we're in young Ian's point of view, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Young Ian is, in fact, a main character, but I don't know, I didn't really think this was necessary, but basically we already know that he was snatched by pirates. We see him getting dragged off the island, holding the chest, right back to where Jamie and Claire are shouting from the shoreline, and Ian doesn't go without fighting his captors, but he's forced aboard the Bruja, very harshly treated. Though he's not hurt, he's delivered to Jamaica, and he's thrown a cell where he finds another young man hiding and locked up, and he's told a tale of other young men who are in the same cell, but were taken to see the Bakra and never returned, and of course he asks what a Bakra is, and when we next see him, he's having his meeting with the aforementioned Bakra, and basically it turns out to be this slave servant named Hercules. And yes, this episode focuses a lot on slavery, and I'm not gonna lie, it really overdid it with the social commentary. Look, I get it, they're trying to be progressive. I get it, they're trying to, you know, touch on this subject, but I did not think Outlander was the show to touch upon slavery. It really did not work, but he takes Ian to a room, sits him down in a bed. He promptly leaves the room as Ian contemplates his fate based on what the other prisoners told him, and the next thing he sees is a blood-coated foot rise in the air to catch his attention, and again, this is all real. This isn't like he's dreaming. This all happens. He had noticed the figure in the bath directly in front of him. It's bathing in goat's blood, and we hear this very familiar Scottish female voice join the foot, and I'm like, wait, why does that voice sound so familiar? Why does it sound like I know this character? And, the view turns so that we can see the back of the woman. She's nude, she's coated in blood up to the neck, stepping to the bath. She turns to look over her shoulder and announces her name as a ghost from the past, and it turns out to be Gayless. Yes, this is the person who has held him captive, and Gayless is now a straight-up villain. I don't know why, but she's now a villain, and she comes around to stand in front of Ian. She starts pouring water on herself to wash away the blood, and as a young man, he's obviously about to rouse, but he's also very much repulsed by what's going on, so Hercules arrives with a tray of cakes and tea. Naturally, he's hungry, so it doesn't take much for prodding him to get him to eat and drink from the tray, and Gayless starts asking about a sapphire jewel that's missing from the box. Ian blurts out that he thought that Jamie took it, and he then claps his hand over his mouth, eyes flying wide open as he looks suspiciously at the teacup saucer holding the tea she gave him, and she admits that she spiked it with a witch doctor's potion to make him tell the truth, and and she's surprised to find Ian's the nephew of Jamie Fraser, but she also knows that Jamie will come for his nephew, so she knows very well what she's getting herself into, and she doesn't really seem to care here, so she continues her seduction of the young man, reveals she uses young virgins, and this is the goat's blood in general was very weird, but this was even weirder. Apparently, she uses young virgins to get their power, then she discards them when she's done. So, Ian informs her he's not a virgin to her brief surprise. She pulls him closer using her toes on his shirt, and basically, basically very quickly they get down to business. He really can't resist, and that is the way the beginning starts, which, like I said, it's just very strange. I'll get to what exactly they did with Galus and why I thought this was a really dumb choice, but really, out of everyone, this is how you reintroduce Galus. I mean, I knew she was going to come back in some way, but this just felt like such an afterthought. It felt like the only reason they brought her back is because they needed an actual threat for the season. They just kind of threw Galus in there, and it really just doesn't go what we've come to know with the character over the years. Over the years, we've seen Galus, sure, she's a bit sick in the head, but for the most part, she was decent, and she was nice to Claire, so I don't know why she would do this, and the episode doesn't really take the time to explain why she'd really do something like this, and it just really didn't work when it comes to this character. So Jamie and Claire finally make it to Jamaica with Fergus and Marsley, and they first must tend to the cargo that allowed them to journey to Jamaica on the Artemis. Then the next order of business is to find Ian, and I like the urgency. Like I said, that's one of my favorite parts of this episode, is the urgency. You can tell that they're doing whatever they can to search for him, and they need to get things done before the porpoise arrives with the skeleton crew who Claire saved, and a captain determined to find and arrest Jamie. So Jamie meets the contact who's to receive the cargo and is offered an invitation to the governor's ball to celebrate the new governor of the British territory, and that forward momentum kind of stops here, because literally the rest of this episode is Jamie and Claire at this governor's ball, and I get it, they have this invitation, but the whole time I'm thinking, guys, you have someone to find. You have Ian to look for. I mean, you don't really have much time left. It just, they get sailed in, they start combing the slave market to see if young Ian was among the stock of the slave traders, and Claire's naturally appalled at what she sees. She also knows there's a time when the horrible trade of humans will be put down, and I thought they did a good job, but like I said, it just became a little bit heavy-handed. I get what Outlander was trying to do, don't get me wrong. I get it, it's the 1700s, and slaves are being treated in these horrible, horrible ways, and I get it that we are in Jamaica where this is going on, but I just didn't think Outlander was the show to do it. There's so much other stuff going on. There's so much ground to cover. This was really not the time, in my opinion at least, to dive into the topic of slavery. Not saying that they couldn't have done it, I just don't think this was the right time to do it, unfortunately. If they wanted to do it, they should have done it throughout the season, and it just felt so sudden, like, oh, of course we're just gonna bring up the topic of slavery, because, we have to do that. It didn't feel natural for the plots, and it just, all in all, it just didn't really come together for me. But basically, Jamie speaks to the slave traders in the hopes of finding Ian, and discovers the governor's house had purchased the entire lot of slaves from the Bruja, and it was lucky that Jamie and Claire were given an invitation to the ball after all. So the search continues, but at least they had a breadcrumb to follow, and Jamie turns around and is looking for Claire. Of course, she's wandered off, and basically, she lashes out, of course, because she sees what's going on in the slave market, and she watches as a young slave woman is branded with a hot iron. There's one slave on the platform being auctioned, and one prospective patron looking at the poor man for her breeding stock, and he wants proof of the slave's virility. So the trader's attempting to stifle the poor slave's resolve to demonstrate, and Claire simply loses all control. She lashes out. She's not at all happy with this. She hits the man, starting a massive fight in the market. Jamie comes to her rescue, and again, there's nothing bad about this. I like seeing Claire be naturally disturbed about this stuff, but again, you need to be tracking down Ian. This is just really taking away from that, and it slows down the momentum, and Jamie does the only thing he can possibly do. He decides to purchase the man. So Claire now owns this young male slave named Temery throughout the rest of this episode, and Jamie and Claire both agree that he will need to be freed. They contemplate how and when to do it safely so that he won't land back in that market or dead, and plus he might actually be of service to them. So they need to go to the governor's ball, so they ask Temery to help them by speaking to the other slaves of the house. Jamie cannot speak to them, but another slave can do it discreetly, so they explain that they intend to free him when the opportunity is safe, and ask if they have a bargain and discuss discussing their need to find young Ian with the other slaves, and Temery is shocked by the blunt knowledge that they want to free him. You know, I think this is the first time he's ever heard about someone freeing him, but agrees to help with the inquiries about Ian. So at Gaelus's plantation, she's now known as the widow Mrs. Abernathy, and is hosting Archibald Campbell and his sister Margaret Campbell, and this is the reason the Campbells journey from Scotland after Claire visit them in Edinburgh. So this was interesting. The only problem is I don't give a shit about these characters. We saw the Campbells for like 1 second this season, and you're expecting me to now connect the dots. It just doesn't really work. And again, it just seemed like they did this just to be like, oh, it's all connecting, it's all coming together, you know, all this stuff we showed you, there was a purpose for it, and unfortunately, again, it just didn't come together here. So Gaelus needs a sapphire that Jamie took from the treasure box to see about a third Scottish uprising in the future. She was told about by a different fortune teller, and if you recall, Jamie gave the jewel to Lord Grey, which basically was confiscated while he was in prison, and Gaelus is beside herself because she has no knowledge of the stone, and Archibald asks how she came to know the treasure. Gaelus became aware of the family treasure of the Mackenzie clan through Dougal, and Margaret must hold all 3 sapphires to see and speak the prophecy. So the Fraser party attend the governor's ball later that night, and basically, you know, Jamie's looking like the Duke of Santagram in this scene, but basically the governor's ball allows us to see some of the previous French attire tried out of the occasion. Even Mr. Willoughby's present and wearing one of Jamie's French outfits as well. So they reminisce about the clothes and their time at Versailles, and this was a good scene. I like that they're reminiscing about it. They walk up the entrance steps. She's surprised to see Archibald Campbell. They chat briefly, then Claire and Jamie join the receiving line to see the governor, and as they're surrounded by slave servants, Jamie asks Claire when the slave trade will end. Claire knows it'll be 70 more years before Britain stops the practice, and 100 years before what will become of the United States of America when they no longer have slaves. So they wait in line. Some women become intrigued by Yai Tian Chow standing just behind Jamie, and Mr. Willoughby finds the entire encounter amusing and indulges the ladies. He then turns to see Margaret Campbell telling a slave of his imminent freedom, and Margaret and Chow share a glance across the room. They breathe a smile, and Chow's not happy with how Margaret's brother continues to treat her. So Jamie and Claire remark about Fergus and Marsali giggling and imparting affection without being too obvious, and Claire remarks how she and Jamie were once that way. They joke a little bit, but then share a deeply intimate and longing glance, and again, it's a good scene. It's slowing things down here. Once you see they're close enough to see the new governor, and we see, finally, after so many episodes, we finally get to see Lord Grey again, and I was really happy to see this character, you know. I missed him from the other episodes. He's been billed as a main character. He's had, like, nothing to do ever since then, and, I'm glad to see he returned here. And we can just see he's got this real pleasure and shock on his face because, of course, he's still attracted to Jamie. He still really does love him, and Jamie's pleased to see him too, and to introduce Claire to him. And Lord Grey's excitingly surprised and asks how she was restored to Jamie. Claire just says the long story without elaborating, and Lord John Grey leaves the couple into a quiet room so that they can talk in private. And basically, across the room, Gaelus sees the pair walking with the governor. So Lord John asks Jamie if he's well, but Jamie only wants to hear of his son, Willie, of course, because that's what matters to him, is his son Willie and everything. So basically, Jamie and Grey share a far too long glance, and it isn't missed by Claire. They speak briefly about the boy and eventually get around to why Jamie's on the island at all. So he knows the sapphire that Major Grey took from him, mounted in a token on his hip. And Grey explains he made in the token, and he wears it as remembrance. So he takes his leave of the couple. Jamie's left to gather his feelings with Claire looking on, and back out in the crowd that tends to the ball, Jamie and Claire mingle, trying to find word of Ian. Jamie goes one way, Claire goes another, and Chow then finds Margaret Campbell sitting quietly outside near a fountain. He explains he didn't like how her brother treated her and calls her a flower from heaven, and as she touches his hand, she says that he's a rare soul, and I don't know if they're setting up a potential romance for Chow, but I like this. I do like that Mr. Willoughby, you know, maybe he's getting a little action here, or maybe he just has genuine concern for the woman. It really could go either way, but I really like Mr. Willoughby. I like what they've done in this season. I think his character has worked very well. But again, his stuff doesn't feel heavy-handed because we've seen him for more than one episode. We're just now seeing the slavery stuff, and already it's feeling very on the nose and much less subtle than I think they wanted it to. So Gray then approaches Claire and mentions he did meet her before the Rising. They joke a little about the events when he was a 16-year-old boy who attempted to kill Red Jamie, and I like this scene between the two. Claire mentions that Jamie had told her a great deal about all the events involving his son and Lord John's wife's sister as the boy's mother, and she changed the subject to the Sapphire, and Gray explains that Jamie gave it to him while he was a prisoner. Gray mentions that it was good to finally meet the love who was Jamie's every heartbeat. She smiles and looks across the room for a second to see Galis, and Gray notices the surprise. Claire excuses herself abruptly to follow Galis outside, and now we come to what is easily my least favorite part of this episode, because, look, I get it that they're writing Galis as a villain. I totally understand that. But this just didn't feel like Galis, honestly. It really didn't. Just in general, I didn't really feel like this felt like the Galis that we've known. I mean, Claire and Galis, they had a genuine connection. There's nothing to argue with that these two were best friends. And sure, Galis was a little bit crazy, and sure, you know, she killed some people, but she killed the people that were harming her and the people that were doing bad things to her. They never really, she never really seemed like she had this evil intent and that she was after Claire. It doesn't work here. She finds Galis outside, and of course the first question is how the hell she survived the fire after the witch trial, and Galis explains the pregnancy saved her life. They had to let her survive long enough to deliver the child, and, of course, in this scene, you know, I guess it makes sense because Bree was the only one who knew about Gillian Edgers, and, who she really was, but correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Claire see Gillian Edgers, before she went into that fire, back in the 60s? Isn't that what went down? Am I crazy about that? I'm pretty sure that Claire actually knew, that Galis was there. So this just felt like an old conversation. I didn't really understand this, but basically the child wasn't innocent. Its death would constitute murder. And then Duel came and took the child away to her another family. He helped her to escape by putting an old woman who passed 3 days before the cloak Galis was to be burned in. And Claire's surprised by all this. She reveals she eventually married a sugar plantation owner, is now Mistress Abernathy. She asks Claire why she's in Jamaica, and like she didn't already know from Ian, and Claire explains they're looking for young Ian, and Galis fakes support and concern. You can tell she's faking the whole thing. So she wants to go in and find Jamie, so Claire takes her in to find him. He's sitting with the governor when Claire locates him. Jamie stands her approach and is shocked to see Galis approaching behind her, so she notices the token with the sapphire, abruptly leaves to get Archibald, and she tells him to do the readings for the crowd and manipulates Gray into a reading, and the sapphire finds itself in Margaret Campbell's hands. She provides the prophecy that Galis wanted to hear, while Jamie and Claire, they look on with deep suspicion, and the reading's very cryptic. Galis runs outside with Archibald to understand what Margaret exactly said, and he tells Galis it's meant that a new Scottish king would rise when a 200-year-old baby was killed on the day of its birth. And Fergus and Marsley are outside. They're gushing about being married when they see the entrance of British troops led by Captain Laird, because of course they were going to find them. So Jamie and Claire immediately leave. They actually run into their new servant Temery while heading for the carriage, and Temery did find Ian and explains he was taken to Mrs. Abernathy. And Claire realized that Galis was straight up lying to her, and Jamie then promised to take Temery to the escaped slaves he asked to be left with for his freedom. And as they ride to bring Temery to his freedom, the British soldiers find Jamie and Claire on the road. Jamie gives Claire his children's picture just before he's taken by the soldiers, and Claire then cusses out the captain for taking him away after she saved all their lives. Jamie's still taken away, despite the fact that Claire, saved all of them, and Claire's left on the road with a carriage. I don't know why, he's just taken away for whatever reason, and that is the way this episode ends. Oh, here's the thing, guys. I'm not gonna say this episode was a complete misfire, because there was stuff in here that I did enjoy. The scenes with Gray and Claire I thought were well done. I thought the stuff with Fergus and Marsley was well done. And I thought the overall narrative was good. I liked the urgency throughout this episode that they were trying to track down young Ian. But the way that this was handled, I thought was completely wrong, especially when it comes to Galis. Because, look, I mean, I've said it, Galis was crazy. Galis wasn't ever someone who, was rational. Sure, she made a lot of decisions, but everything that she did that was insane was to protect herself, and was because, Dougal was abusing her, or because of everyone thought she was a witch. I mean, obviously, she's gonna go around killing people, so that made perfect sense. It made sense for the character. But the one thing that seemed genuine throughout all of it was her connection with Claire. It seemed like these two had a genuine friendship. It seemed like they had that bond, especially when it was revealed that she was a time traveler. I was really hoping the show would give them this newfound connection, because now we know who she actually is, that she is Gillian Edgers. And not only do they never bring it up in this episode, but they completely ruin the character. Honestly, I think they might have just ruined Geillis as a character. And I really liked her character, and I wanted to see Lotte Verbeek come back. But with this, I think they might have just ruined her. Because if you're telling me that the Geillis that we saw in, season 1, who was so genuine towards Claire and really just had this connection with her and, she wanted to do what she can to get away from Dougal, and that same woman would now go after all these young boys and try to take the treasure and all this other stuff. It just felt so out of character. I don't know what the show's really trying to do here. And here's the thing. They could have easily explained this. Like, they could have done a whole episode where we see Geillis' backstory and they flesh her out. Honestly, I wish they could have done that. But again, because this entire season was so fucking rushed, they couldn't do something like that. They weren't able to give us time. There wasn't time to flesh out her character, and again, to me, it seems like the only reason they did this is so they have a villain for the end of the season. Now, I don't know what they do in the books. I don't know if they destroy Geillis' character like this in the books, but I'm willing to bet that there's at least a logical explanation for why she suddenly waffled over to the other side. It feels like so out of left field. It doesn't go with her character at all, and I just don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why they chose Geillis, and honestly, I wish they just killed her off. I really do. I wish that the last thing we saw of her was the burning, because now it just seems like they've completely forgotten what this character actually is, and the fact that there was no mention of her in the present day, are you fucking kidding me? It felt so out of left field. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, and I don't know what they were really trying to do here. So, in general, I was not at all a fan of this plot line. And I would have been a bit more forgiving had the rest of the episode been really good, but in my opinion, it just wasn't. I think that there was a lot of stuff here that was very heavy-handed. I get that they want to do social commentary on slavery. I totally get that, but this was just not the show to do it. Because again, we have 2 episodes left this season, and we're leaving Jamaica after this. They've already confirmed we're going to America next season, so I don't even know why they spent so much time on the whole slave trade thing and that they adopted this slave boy. I mean, I just don't care. I really don't. There's no point in doing this. It feels so random. It feels like they're just kind of trying to shed light on this specific subject, but this just wasn't the episode to do it. A time to do it would have been in the middle of the season, but again, they waited way too long to get to Jamaica, and now that we're here, the season's almost over, so there's not really much time to flesh out these characters or do anything like that. So again, that really didn't work out for me at all. I just, that whole thing with Temery, I guess was okay, but I didn't care about his character because we literally just met him in this episode, and we're probably never going to hear about him again, maybe in the finale, but other than that, I don't think we're going to hear about him again. Jamie getting captured as well, I think it's only because they wanted to add momentum to the season, and once again, they wanted to keep Jamie and Claire apart, because apparently that's the theme of the season. We have to keep these two at arm's length. They can only be together one per episode, one episode together, and then they have to be on their own. It's dumb, it's repetitive, and I really can't stand it. As far as things go with Gray, it was cool to see this character again. I like what they did with him overall. I thought he definitely was well done, but the fact that Geillis is using him, again, it just doesn't go with their character. There's nothing here that makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't really all add up, and it's very confusing. It's very confusing, and if we have Geillis just be completely hostile towards Claire, it's just not going to make any sense. If the one thing I think they should have done to Geillis is give her that shred of humanity, show her niceties towards Claire, show that she does have some sort of genuine soul, but this one seems like she's been completely stripped of any sort of substance or any sort of heart that the character previously had, and it just doesn't feel like the same character, unfortunately, and again, it just feels like it completely ruined her. So, needless to say, guys, I was very let down by this episode. This is easily, in my opinion, the worst episode of the season. I didn't necessarily hate this episode because it didn't piss me off completely, but what they did to Geillis really did piss me off. I really like this character, and I think they might have just ruined her, unfortunately. And I don't know, the finale might be my breaking point with this show. I might breach my M with this show. We'll just have to see the way it really does work out. But this episode was extremely disappointing. There was so much potential for what they could have done, and again, it halted the momentum. It gave us one of the dumbest reveals I think we've gotten on the show, and it completely ruined one of, I think, the show's best characters, and they just completely ruined her altogether. But overall, guys, I really was not a fan of this episode at all, and I am going to give Outlander Season 3, Episode 12, The Bakra, a C-. So overall, guys, maybe this episode of Outlander, once you guys saw this episode overall, left your thoughts on it. Like I said, guys, didn't hate this episode, but if this is really the direction we're going to go now, I'm just really not all for it. I think it is definitely the wrong direction to take. I really like Geillis as a character, but I don't think they need to do this to her. You know, Lotte Verbeek is very talented, but I didn't need to see this happen. But that's in my review. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.